Hi there, welcome back to the Dylan Rounds case. Today, I'm going to be more so focusing on catching up with comments and discussions around the case, but also taking a brief look at the horse gate theory. At least when I tried looking back on my previous videos, I didn't come across a direct video titled that. So I just want to do a video today around that, but not completely dedicated. Why? I did a poll last night and the majority of people said no, they didn't want a dedicated video. Maybe not a dedicated video, but at least a video which covers it isn't going to cause any harm. Because I did bring in an additional question which hasn't been answered from last night, which I do want to bring back in again, which is relevant to the topic of today. So welcome to people that are watching live, and welcome to the people that watch in the background, the good people that watch in the background, and then the rest. You can share your thoughts and opinions in the live chat box on the right hand side of the screen. I'm sure we can do some additional responses as well. I have noticed a little bit of hypocrisy or certain attitudes, but it is what it is. You can share your thoughts in the comment section as well if you wish to. I think there's some people that were saying that when it comes more so to the live Premier chat, you're limited to what you can type because of character limit. You know, you got a 200 character limit, right? It's always been that way. That's just the way YouTube is. Try going on Twitter and making a tweet. Even worse, okay? Ultimately, if you do want to elaborate with your comments, that's why the comment section is down below. It's not as limiting, okay? Unless you're Corey, that does write, quite lengthy paragraphs, but that's an exception there. If you do want to watch or visit some additional links, they'll be down below in the pinned comments section. And if you haven't already catched up on my previous videos, feel free to do so when you do have the time. I think today I'll probably be kicking it off more with the focus on the recent comments by people, and we can go from there. See if there's any additional ones by Corey or just from people in general. There's no harm in acknowledging that. As for two other videos, they can be done at a later date, whether it be tomorrow or a few days afterwards. One looking back at a forum page, catching up with everything there, the discussions. And then another time acknowledging one of the, not exactly a theory, I would call it a theory, but others are very hard-headed and believe it's a fact, to do with Dylan regarding previous talk. And I just want to put it all together because I have noticed a pattern with certain type of people that think a certain way and their own, presence they give off. But more about that at a later point. Just as a heads up, because there's no harm in doing so, I believe it was yesterday what we looked at, and I'll just briefly explain because if you want the full story, you can always look back at the video. So it was to do with regarding the Lance Kelly situation, both with the dog, questioning that, the genuinity of it, but also the background stuff going on, the stalking or harassment as Lance Kelly claims. Not me, but what he claims. And I was just basically covering it last night. Obviously, people aren't always going to agree with it, but at the end of the day, I'm just simply looking at what, other people are looking at, really, and coming out with for and against arguments on both sides like usual. But also looking at Mob Crew Chris, revealing the possible explanation why he's no longer active or present in the case. So, in certain aspects you can argue and say, and adding in what he was talking about was due to other people's actions and behaviours, it's kind of screwed other people over. So they're no longer able to do what they do, or it's not as worthwhile, not as meaningful now, or it's a bit messy, so then they've moved on. So what it really does put into perspective, and I don't think it could be in general in life an unpopular opinion, but whilst majority may be quick to say, right, we need as many people in this case covering it, maybe spread out across different platforms would have been the best way to have gone, right? I think that if you've got too many people covering a case, nothing but trouble. Too many people, too many personalities, too many ideas, opinions, but on this case, it's not just simply opinions, it's people that want to make opinions facts. And all that tension rubbing up the wrong way. Is it a great amount of people that have covered this case over time? I wouldn't say a great amount, but enough within the same space, because how it all begun was all on one platform, right? YouTube. You don't hear it worded as by Candice Cooley family, oh, those people on Kick, those people on Twitch, those people on Facebook Live, those people on Rumble. It's always referred to the YouTubers because that's where it begun. That's where the trouble begun, that's where it was covered first, and that's where Candice Cooley came first. More so when it came to the online stuff. So with that aside, things continue, other people move on. Just one of those things, right? You could ask yourself, is it ultimately the end of the world if, for whatever reason, everybody stopped covering the Dylan Rounds case? How bad would that really be? It wouldn't speed up, nor would it delay the search for Dylan Rounds in real life. It wouldn't speed up or delay the court hearings or appearances of Brenna either. It's just the online aspect, keeping the case alive, keeping it up in the search terms, the hashtags, the filters, the relevancy, the dates, mainly that. I mean, of course, you've still got the official news channels. You still have, some official big channels that may cover it here and there randomly, or when there's a true update. So just being honest. There's no harm in being honest. If everybody stopped covering the Dylan Rounds case, at least on YouTube, it's not going to directly, internally harm the case too much. It could fade away as for online, because you got to understand that the Dylan Rounds case compared to other missing people cases out there aren't as popular. And it's been like that for some time. As bad as it sounds when you've got the direct competition of other missing people out there, like at a time Kylie Rodney, other people, and quite a few, were mentioning the unfortunate biased popularity contest because of characteristics with one individual compared to the other. So you could say that the Dylan Rounds case would have it harder in a negative way when it comes to people backing off. Look at the Kylie Rodney case. Although people don't really cover it now, it's still there. You still see it in the recommended videos, the thumbnails on YouTube. It's just interesting in general, right? So sometimes maybe it does feel like you're fighting a losing battle, just because of the way the scales are to begin with the case. But at least just with my mentality of the case, I only cover what I can cover, what is available, and certain thoughts and ideas that come about. If there is absolutely nothing, then there are no videos. Does that make sense? As I've always said, I don't like the idea of forcing things out. If it's natural, that's what matters the most. Not everybody always sides with naturalness, and we've seen in many different ways. But that aside, just wanted to give a little introduction there for the people joining on in, and for those that are a little bit late to this live premiere, let's say. So I think to kick things off, we will be looking at the YouTube comments there at least. Then we can transition on to the next part of the clip. I did do a little short cut break early on in this video because of an inconsiderate tool next door with noising, but I made sure that was somewhat silenced. That aside, let's head on over to the YouTube comment section right now, answer any questions, and see if there's any additional important information. Here we are. Let's adjust the comments. We do have quite a few to get through. More longer, in-depth comments, which is kind of a good thing to see at times, right? I know some people said that they didn't want the horse gate and the grain shed coverage. As said, it's going to be shortened down a little bit this time. Hopefully you understand the majority of this will be looking at the comments and acknowledging people's recent responses there. And if you agree or disagree, well, you can make it clear in the live chat box on the right-hand side of the screen. Beginning with, we've got Skeptical saying anticipation, because that was upcoming for the live premiere at the time. Caroline Milton, arrived late, starting from the beginning now. That's okay. We've got a comment here edited by Indiana. What's mentioned here? From what I gather, JD and Colton were at Dylan's farm prior to Candice Cooley and Justin, so the rumour is true that JD and Colton took Dylan's key fob and handgun back to Larry's. Could it not have been Colton that went in Dylan's truck and pulled the seat back looking for the rifle Dylan kept there, and as a typical lad was putting the truck in and out of gear, then locking up the truck before leaving with JD to go back to Idaho? And what else did they find and take back that we do not know about? For example, Dylan's wallet, paperwork and or money, including the rifle that was claimed to be found on Dylan's bed at his grandparents' house. Well, just to acknowledge one thing, at least from what I remember hearing by Candice Cooley, the grandparents as well, it wasn't a rifle, Indiana, it was a shotgun. What exact model, I'm not quite sure, okay? The only thing that has been worded in the past, and it's never really changed, besides the typical gun and key fob theory, did it return, did it not, was it ever moved, who was it by, etc., put that aside, it was only ever really worded as Dylan's personal handgun, whatever type it was, pistol, was in the truck, and no other firearms. But could there always be twists and turns? You never know. But at least regarding the one that was supposedly at the grandparents' house, it wasn't a rifle, it was a shotgun. A shotgun is different to a rifle, and so are the calibers and rounds, okay? As for the responses, Tom, great point about the wallet. I haven't heard anything at all about the wallet being found. I, for one, will say Mob Crew Chris means nothing to me. In this case, I find him useless. I think, Tom, we can have a little look at that and I'll give you my thoughts regarding Mob Crew Chris. I think, to an extent, what you said there could be considered a little bit irresponsible, but we'll get back to that. Corey responding to Indiana, saying, which I've tried to explain several times, is exactly what happened. So Corey's acknowledging Indiana's comment. Hopefully Indiana sees that, but have been ignored. JD was worried because he had not heard from Dylan in over 24 hours. He realised something was wrong when he found the gun and fob and the tracker and truck parked at the edge of the field and seed still in the drill. But no, where was Dylan? Christy responds to Tom saying Chris from Mob Crew did an excellent job, boots on ground with his cousin. He has a huge number of excellent drone material about the entire area. He was really committed to try Dylan's family to find Dylan and let other channels use his drone footage. Some of them took advantage of him because he is a good soul and family sort of stopped working with him, thinking was dodgy like other creators. So, putting everyone all in the same grounds, even though it wasn't really the case. I used to follow him at the beginning of the case. Chris is from the area too. What made it easier for him to explain the terrain, he immediately focused on the wash and flew the drone over there. It's a good summary by Christy. What else? So they already knew he was dead. Indiana, are they involved, you think? Or were they sent to the truck to take the objects by Candice Cooley or just in rounds? Corey responding to Christy, none of the family or the boys were involved. JD was only worried and went to look and check on Dylan on his own. No one called him or asked him. He was just concerned. Indiana responding to Christy, no, it was just that JD and Colton were there first, but at that time did they arrive? And what time did they leave before either Candice Cooley or Justin arrived? How much time did they both have to play with whilst alone? Ooh, long comment. Skeptical, well done. What does Skeptical say here? This information is all new to me and it breaks my heart. I'm being led to believe by these comments and in the chat that those closest to Dylan would purposely hide evidence and information. The parents have been very clear on the timeline and events from the start. I have never heard from the parents directly that anyone went to Dylan's farm the day before they arrived, let alone accuse or explain away why they took important items to Dylan's grandfather's. The man that gave him everything to somehow protect these boys by returning the items and then only to tell his father, a man who truly loves his son and would do everything to find out what happened, keeping the information away from his mother and L.E., only to be revealed here. Fair point. I don't believe it. And now the best friend is being accused of taking and touching other items that have significant bearing on his case without telling anyone. Skeptical, to say the least. Fair enough, fair enough. We can return back to certain points here. Do you know what? Fair enough. Do you know what? I'm going to say it now just because, just in case I forget. So first of all, with some of Corey's comments, okay, we got some additional responses from Corey last night, and Corey recently saying, well, that's what I've been trying to tell all this time. That's what I've been trying to say all this time. Well, Corey, you have been trying to tell this and that all this time, and you may label others as tunnel vision. Sometimes, Corey, your own individual responses are tunnel visioned, focused on a particular part. Sometimes when a question is asked, sometimes you haven't always responded back. That's what Tom Evans has said from his experience, though likely that could have changed ever since with background communication going on over there. At least from my experience, here and there are times where I've asked Corey a question and she hasn't always answered that specific direct question. This is the thing. People may say I don't question enough at times, but then when I do question, then I get labelled and called out as some kind of person interrogating another individual. Tom Evans briefly demonstrated that last night by questioning my ability when it comes to simply asking a question and awaiting a response, which is an answer, which took a bit of time to get out of Corey, but eventually it was cleared up there at least. But the thing is, whilst a certain idea has been told, or in the eyes, in the mindset of them, what they know, the facts, these young individuals being responsible, J.D. Colton taking the items away, getting there first, going to the grandfathers. Okay, heard that before, heard you mention it over and over again, fair enough. But the term about the prints, the DNA being completely cleaned and wiped off of it. Quite a few people in the background, not just Corey, not just people that support Corey, not just Fast Eddie and others that were constantly saying, well, how do you know about the prints being wiped off? Maybe Candice Cooley is lying. Maybe she is wrong. If she doesn't know about these items that were actually taken by a different set of people and not by suspects, it was like friends and family, etc., responsible, then would Candice Cooley know what she says? And then last night, Corey basically said that, well, Candice Cooley talking about the prints and DNA being cleaned off those items, it didn't come from Candice Cooley, it came from Larry. But once again, Corey didn't word it clear enough, so I kept asking a question followed by another question, which was eventually cleared up by me rewording and restructuring the whole sentence, and then Corey said, yes, that's it. So basically the short story is, from what Corey was trying to get the point across, which I re-clarified by asking the right questions and a bit more direct, although it was a bit time-consuming, supposedly, that J.D. Colton items taken away, took to grandfathers. Larry Rounds being the individual that supposedly cleaned the items down and then had them returned back. But Candice Cooley was never told, but Justin Rounds does know or something. But the ones that do know the actual story supposedly just haven't bothered talking about it publicly, so Candice Cooley is left in the dark, which isn't exactly good. I know maybe you can't tell Candice Cooley stuff because she could be a bit uncontrollable at times, and if the LE hasn't always cooperated with her because they don't trust her, so it's more one-sided, right? But in terms of the general public, from what we supposedly know of these days, can't really be blamed for being misinformed or sticking with a false truth if they haven't directly heard or seen it from the key individuals in the case. In fact, they have to take the word of a third-party representative who's in contact with those family members out there. Hopefully you understand that. Some people need convincing more than others. Some people are very passionate about evidence, screenshots, hard material like that. Candice Cooley has, would you say Candice Cooley has provided evidence and hard material? Maybe not exactly or specifically, but in terms of quoting somebody from what they've said themselves, you've got the post online and in the interviews Candice Cooley has participated in. So the con is the negative, incorrect, inaccurate at times Candice Cooley. but at least she's putting herself out there to say this and that, so then we can listen, learn, agree or to disagree with it. Justin Rounds and other family members hold back, keep quiet. Maybe that's to protect and preserve the case, but those family members that hold back and don't inform the general public the real truth besides what Corey is supposedly doing, you can't blame the general public for thinking a certain way, which may not align with what the other family members know of. If the other family members out there really want the general public to, not be led astray, then they should do something themselves. Just saying. That's all I'm saying, end of the day. Now, to return back to Tom Evans' point besides the questioning. For Tom to, how do we put this into balance? Tom Evans interpreted it as if I was disrespecting Corey in recent time. In Tom's mindset, Corey has been kind enough to come on in with the knowledge and information she knows of. She's here to try and help spread awareness of the real truth. And Tom Evans is grateful of that. But because I am a certain way and how I question things, Tom interpreted it as it was being very rude. But it is a little bit hypocritical, Tom, in all fairness, for you to call me out on that when I'm just following with formal procedure, as you've always seen. Once again, I've been this way with other people in the past, which maybe you didn't like out there, but you didn't question me back then. It's only all of a sudden when it's someone you like. Kind of like the Indiana situation with Bob Farrell, okay? It is a level of hypocrisy and further reinforced by Tom just randomly calling out the likes of Mob Crew Chris as a useless individual in the Dylan Rounds case. That's a very reckless line. Now, let's respect that's what Tom Evans thinks, it's his opinion. But in terms of the reality and what's been demonstrated by Mob Crew Chris, an individual before the Dylan Rounds case at one point was homeless on the street but managed to claw it back and also still make the time to cover cases of other missing people out there despite what Mob Crew Chris has gone through himself and whatever else lies in the background. That when Mob Crew Chris was covering the Dylan Rounds case in the early days, not only was he hands-on physically, right? And this is coming from me, someone that didn't watch Mob Crew Chris immediately, but I catched up afterwards, okay? But for Mob Crew Chris to be out there physically, boots on grounds, that's a big tick. Hands-on, trying, caring, directly looking for Dylan and trying to find answers, but also documenting it as well to then share with the general public, whether it be the drone footage, which is at the time very useful and very much needed when the police, the LE, weren't really pushing the usage of drones themselves. So for Mob Crew Chris to do it himself with his equipment, his resources, his time, his effort, and maybe money spent here and there, that should be acknowledged. And then presenting it online as well, whilst doing live streams here and there, a few interviews with Candice Cooley. You could genuinely say that Mob Crew Chris, when it comes to overall coverage on the Dylan Rounds case, he's probably one of the biggest all-rounders in the case. Being able to work alongside the family, not just Candice Cooley, but Justin Rounds as well, when it came to operating the drones, when it came to the big push before winter time and actually going out there, documenting it, but also having the discussions with viewers and general public online, with Mob Crew Chris sharing his own insights and thoughts with his own experiences out there. Not only is he keeping the case alive online at the time, not only is he providing a different perspective and viewpoint with the equipment he had, but he's also trying to get out there physically, boots on ground footage, which should be acknowledged at the end of the day. Now, besides that, the fact is that I wouldn't say Mob Crew Chris was useless. How Mob Crew Chris did his video live streams, how he did those timestamps and order of dates, how he arranged it visually, whether it be his PowerPoint presentations or if it was like a Word document, it was very clear and somewhat straight to the point. And the visual storytelling by Mob Crew Chris needs to be acknowledged. Whilst I've got my own speciality, which is the usage of maps and being able to visualize the area despite never being there, but doing it, Mob Crew Chris did it more in a formal way, maybe less visual without maps, but more so photos or example photos of items or objects alongside the timestamps and timelines of the events of how things supposedly played out, right? So it was creative, it was effective. Even the thumbnails as well at times, eye-catching. An all-rounder when it comes to the Dylan Rounds case, although granted he's not covering it anymore. Will he cover it in the future? Probably, if he gets the chance, opportunity, if there's something to do to interact with. But as I said, the way Mob Crew Chris worded it, because of other people's actions in the case, being a bit irresponsible and reckless, it then impacted him to what he could or what he can't do anymore, which is reaching out to the family. So you can see how it can impact others even when others haven't even played a role, because take one thing into mind, Tom, and I'd say this with a fair degree of confidence and certainty. There might only be a few people out there, but there's a couple of people who have been involved in the Dylan Rounds case, covering online or more so the searches, who have virtually caused little to no drama, conflict, or involved themselves in it to begin with, or get others to attack anyone elsewhere. And the examples would be, of course, Mob Crew Chris, and of course, Scott Natal, alongside Les Natal, but more so Scott Natal's channel. Those are the two channels out there that have both been hands-on in trying to search for Dylan at a point in time, and have both recorded and documented their trips out there via their YouTube channel, right? They're straight to the point. They're focused on the case. They're looking for Dylan. Now, the direction they have is obviously clearer and you could say more focused, because one of their main purposes is going out there physically to search. So there's no reminders, there's no like noises from people, because when you're out there, likely you'll be out there by yourself. So all the people you may see and hear online who are problematic, they're not there when you're in person. So you're clearly focused on one key goal, right? As said, with each position in a case, in each field area, there'll be pros and cons. There will be strengths, weaknesses, there'll be good moments and then negative times. It just varies from position to position and what environment you're in, digital or real life. Both can be good if used and done correctly, okay? So I just wanted to highlight those key people who have never really caused trouble in the case, nor have I really come across people that have come from those channels to then attack me. And I would know a thing about Scott Natal because I did kind of work with him alongside with some others when it came to the Kenny Veach case, starting in around 2020 up to 2021, around that period. As for Mob Crew Chris, I never knew of him before, but when I started watching some of his videos and just seeing how he conducted himself, it was done in, somewhat of a relaxed way, but it wasn't forced. It was done quite well. And of course, to acknowledge, Mob Crew Chris has a more developed, engaged channel. Okay, you look at his statistics. He's been doing it for some time and he's been doing other cases as well. So sometimes when it comes to more experienced channels, they may do things differently, right? They've got a certain way about things that if they ever did get questioned, they just keep on doing what they're doing regardless, because it works for them. To an extent, it applies to me because Dylan Rounds' case, covering that, it's not my first case covering. I've got extensive experience in the bag, so I've got a certain way. If anyone does question my ability when it comes to the coverage and style, all I have to think back to in my head is, well, in 2020, I did what I did. What I was and what I did then is what I'm doing now. Nothing has really changed, right? And what I did back then led to where I am now. So why fix something that isn't broken? Pretty simple, right? So I think, Tom, some of your points there are a little bit wonky, let's just say. Anyway, let's return back to the rest of the YouTube comments. Well, here we are again. Just above Indiana's comment, we've got someone called Barbara. I believe, a new viewer. Let's see what Barbara's got to say. Hi, I still have a huge interest in Dylan Round's case and in the usual cast of characters involved. Surprisingly, I have only discovered and just began watching your channel, Warlight Ref, over the past few days. I have watched 3 premieres and a few other videos so far. I have an appreciation for many different channels for various entertainment reasons, including Bob Farrell's and the previous Salty Pancakes channel. I hope you and Bob will be able to become friends at some point and possibly collaborate on this case. I'm impressed by your knowledge of Dylan's case and enjoy your narration of your videos and premieres. I'll keep watching and hope you continue with the same quality content. I definitely appreciate your excellent verbal and written English grammar skills, somewhat of a rarity on YouTube and on social media in general. Part of that is down to, for over 10 years, analysing humans and even at times self-torturing myself, questioning myself. You know, it leads to a form of resistance, resilience training, at least back then, and I've applied what I've done since, so adaptation. I am interested though, Barbara, if you are very interested in Dylan Round's case, when did you get involved with the case? When did you hear about Dylan's case? Was it at the beginning? Was it of this year or in 2022? And if so, how did you come across my channel now? So like, if you were watching way back then, more so just other people's videos and coverage on the case, out of interest, how did you suddenly find my channel or my videos? Because if you weren't aware, I have created over 400 plus videos on the case. So you would have thought by now people would have known, you know, me creating videos on the case. Unless it's YouTube, the way they push certain people and ignore others, who knows, it can be a popularity contest at the end of the day. But of course, Barbara, let me know when you got involved and how or why you've only just come across my videos now, considering the sheer amount that have been produced. Glenn, shout out to Glenn. Tom, thank you for giving us new food for thought in response to Corey. Corey says, Tom, honestly, I wish people would understand the importance of 24 hours before and after and why players who were enraged with others in that area and the reasons why the whole thing at the farm was fast and clean, nothing missing. Chase was enraged with Kurt for helping Tracy and Hai and needed a shield to get away from Kurt. He was enraged with Chase. Kurt had family and friends coming that weekend and knew Chase was stealing and robbing people. Chase as well stopped Dylan on the road Wednesday. Kurt had said he and his brother were tracking Chase and Robert. My gut feeling is the reason why Chase flagged down Dylan on Wednesday on the way into Montello. And there is when this nightmare started. That simple, hateful vengeance and bad choices in life, vile behaviour. We got that comment there. Cleo, great points. You're welcome. Skeptical, thanks, Warlight Ref. As always, something very sketchy within the chat tonight. Doesn't feel right. Spidey senses are tingling. Well, I said, if you do feel something is off, if you've applied it in the past, let's just say in life, if you've applied it in life in general in the past when you felt something was off and it turned out that was the case, you know, try and stay true to yourself and trust those senses, right? No harm in protecting your own self, protecting your own thoughts. Because at the end of the day, in life, besides the physicality aspects, it can also be mental warfare, right? Psychological effects. Christy does question, though, what was really sketchy, though. Corey adds in saying there is nothing sketchy about the chat. Keeping things simple instead of letting one's mind run wild is usually more correct than not. Angry people and enraged emotional vengeance from players out there was the result of this nightmare. Have you ever heard the saying, those who talk the most or dig theirself in bad situations usually have a reason? Wadsworth's, Ty Corbin, he was very close to Chase and Robert. So we've got a few more links there going about. Skeptical saying, I'm not so sure. Something was off. I've been with Dylan's case from the beginning before Warlight Ref covered it. Maybe like 2 weeks in, and today I'm left with more questions than ever before. Left me scratching my head. Those who talk most or dig themselves in bad situations usually have a reason. Interesting comment. Is that it for there? June, what did Candice Cooley mean when talking about the phone pings then leads us to the tracks in the wash? Indiana saying, I believe there was a phone ping at the wash prior to the last ping at Lucerne Pond. Do you know what, June? If I be honest with you, piecing it together from what I've seen over time, the final phone ping was at Lucerne Pond, hence why the phone was found in the pond. But because Lucerne Pond is very close to the wash, as we've seen on the maps, and because in the mindset of Candice Cooley that there were track marks in the wash, which supposedly at a point in time implied and had linkage to Dylan's vehicle, and the supposed mud underneath the truck which hinted at usage in the wash, I guess one thing was tied with another, and it was more so directional evidence. Final phone ping at the pond near the wash, tracks in the wash, vehicle a bit dirty underneath, one thing led to another. That type of stuff. Now, unfortunately, the tracks were never really followed up properly. I mean, people have written it off already now, claiming that the tracks aren't of Dylan's, they're from Ivor Zadowski, the one that lives or was at Lucerne Airport for the time he spent there. So it's just loose stuff like that. Never really fully sealed up, with certainty. It's been clarified here now, it's been debunked, but it just doesn't feel like it's officially been debunked, unfortunately. The news programmes or coverage there don't seem to highlight it. Cleo, shout out to Cleo. E-Curb saying, I pledge allegiance to the man Warlight Ref, or he might belt you. Under his republic, we will stand united under God today, tomorrow, and forever. I guess this is a joke comment, but, the worst case scenario would be if it was treated as a cult. The ideal state would be lone wolf. Nothing more, nothing less, that's it. A lone wolf that just so happens to come across others that can think for themselves, but also, have reasoning ability, and that is all. But let's just see what the responses are. Indiana saying, is this a cult? Can I join? Eco saying, absolutely. And Cleo, I'm already in the cult. Well, as said, I don't like the idea of a cult, to be honest. It can get very messy, that. We've seen it extensively in the past, and we've even seen it with Charles Manson as well. When it comes to a cult, that's when naturalness is thrown out the window. That's when brainwashing takes place, and it's not a good situation to be in. Even if you were in a situation where you had people that looked up to you, supported you, defended you, but it was all done because somehow you managed to psychologically manipulate them into agreeing with everything you say, whilst it might seem like you've got backup, it's not natural, it's not genuine, it's been forced. It doesn't feel good. It's like a feeling of uneasiness, but really, you wouldn't be thinking or feeling like that if you were perfectly fine with a cult, would you? And if you did want to join a cult, Indiana, normally cults require loyalty, and you clearly stated that you've got zero loyalty. Moving on. June's comment here saying, it's a shame what's happened with the dog Hydra, but might also be a good thing. What kind of place would just take people's words about Lance? I would think they would have to speak to Lance and do some investigation, not just send him a text message like that. Very unprofessional, to say the least. From what I have been seeing, I can't believe the company's excuse. I think they didn't have the dog or something was up. I mean, some people could say it was all one big setup. That could be a conspiracy there, as people like to go into it. Or maybe the vendor, the dog vendor, this whole scenario, this whole debacle may have not been truly official. Do you like when you get these like dodgy people you can reach out to, or these dodgy people reach out to you, try and act all genuine and official, but there's a bit of shadiness in the background? Who knows? Maybe at this point anything is possible. Indiana says, Lance simply did not fit the criteria for owning a cadaver dog and would have known that from first applying, where he would have been turned down, and turned down would have been made official with the company's letter headings. Should Lance try to apply again through another reputable company, he may have even been blacklisted throughout other known reputable training dog companies. So is Lance escaping embarrassment of not being allowed a cadaver dog? Is it all just a scam, or is Lance running from Ty? Take your pick. I mean, personally, it really wouldn't surprise me if Lance Kelly was in a situation where he was trying to get hold of a cadaver dog and he was turned down and rejected because people in the background were interfering and showing their side of the story in a negative way, throwing shade at Lance Kelly and informing the official groups and people out there about it to squash any opportunities Lance Kelly's trying to take, grasp of for the right or wrong reasons. And people somehow may misunderstand what I just said there, but you think about it, there have been a few other people in the Dylan Rounds case when it comes to in real life situations, whether it be their job role or contacts in real life or maybe relationships with people, it's all broken down because one side over the other has then called up maybe a family member, called up an employer, I don't know, in real life about background stuff, whether it be true or not, and then it's negatively harmed the other person in life, and then it's been vice versa, back and forth, like an endless duel. So what we're potentially seeing here is no different to what we've already seen beforehand, right? I mean, Lance Kelly could, whether it be natural or not, could put the slant or shift the story and focus to, what other way of saying it? Well, let me try and speak in his mindset. He could be like, I'm trying to do my thing. I'm trying to look for missing people. I'm trying to make the most of it. I'm trying to move forwards and, gain experience in the training and get the right resources and equipment and stuff, but I'm being denied of that. So then clearly that means people don't want me to search for missing people. Is that because they don't care about missing people, or is it because they're involved in that disappearance case in the first place? That's how the story can be slanted if you was to think that way, or if you were in that position, right? When it comes to actions, there can be responses, maybe consequences at the hands by other people. And you can measure and gauge those responses by people based on your own actions. And if you do feel genuinely that there is a level of resistance, it might be because you are heading on a path which crosses lines with them who are caught up in something. It can get deep at times, it just depends. June saying, Chris is pretty gullible if he thinks Candice Cooley ignores him now because of other channels. He was used and now she has no use for him or his drone. As soon as he did what she wanted from him, you could tell she didn't want him around, sad to say. So what do you mean by that? You could tell she didn't want him? Because at least when looking at the last interview with Chris and Candice Cooley, it seemed somewhat okay. The body language, it seemed like any other one. Or if you think this way, June, are you implying that the same happened with Doug? No thanks, hence why there was no more interviews after that. Would you agree with that? But even if Chris came off as a gullible individual, a gullible, naive, vulnerable person, well, doesn't that just clearly highlight the true innocence or more innocence within Chris? If he means well, if he thinks he's doing the right thing and he thinks he can put trust in the right people, and even if it does go wrong afterwards, it showed his original intentions were pure and true. He stuck to himself. And after all that, he still didn't attack anyone out there. So would Chris be considered useless in the wording by Tom Evans? No. I mean, really, being honest, if you're gonna call someone out who's been out there physically boots on ground as useless, I don't know. Seems a bit of a reach, that. Now, is there any point or time where Ty Corbin could flip that back and try and twist the words and say that I accused him of that as well? No, because at the time, and I just want to reiterate, because I like to bring up historical records when it comes to Ty Corbin with what he's done out there, documenting, sharing the footage onto YouTube, that was good of him as well. As for that particular aspect, when it came to the research part, the fields of have you reached out to this person or that person, Ty Corbin didn't take it the right way there, and that's where it all kicked off. Very unfortunate, but it is what it is. I noticed Ty Corbin did leave a comment on my channel recently, more so the community page, where I was basically asking my own audience and people in general, are you still interested in the case? And Ty Corbin left a comment saying, nobody wants you here. Nobody is interested in you, Raf. I mean, I think a few people will disagree with that, considering within a month or so I've got over 260,000 views, so clearly something is working, right? But I guess people wouldn't know if they don't meet those statistics or milestones, but one of those things, badge of life. Shame on humans. What would Dylan think? Honestly, I think if Dylan saw all this mess going on, he'd probably get murdered again. He'd probably choose that over hearing all this. I think some people will probably think that's really dark, but as I said, always be realistic, cut straight to the point, really pierce through the neural pathways. Charlotte saying those YouTubers, including the Shack Lady. Right. Dawn Marie responding back to Lance saying, how can Lance Kelly take care of this dog? He doesn't work to provide for the dog, let alone his children. He depends on his pity party and he expects people to give him money. Why? He's a able-bodied man who can't hold a job and runs every time he gets called out. I really think Lance don't own any land out there, but don't know for sure. But I've noticed whenever Lance gets called out for his shady doings, he blames everyone else. Never once has he owned his own shitstorm. He just runs away. Lance is an opportunist and has no problem taking advantage of people who genuinely thought he was a good person with a moral compass. He's stolen from those people as far as I'm concerned. I think he should be in jail for fraud. Nothing about what he has done is okay. Hope karma kicks his ass. Better yet, I hope he learns an important life lesson in all of this. You will never prosper over ill-gotten gains. He knows what he's done and is why he runs from place to place. He probably screwed over the wrong person and someone said enough is enough. Okay, I'm done. Thanks for letting me vent. That man really bothers me. He's grown man, he needs to take care of himself, and under no circumstance isn't everybody else's problem to take care of him. He's not 2 years old. Lance, own your own and take responsibility. Maybe people would respect you a little more. Quit blaming everyone but you. Your track record sucks and it's disgusting that you think it's okay to beg people for money to take care of you. Man up, Lance. Grow up. Time to pull up your pants and go get a job and be a productive part of this world. What are you teaching them? Have a happy night. Right, well, that's what Dawn Marie said. My question is just in general, right? People have a negative outlook on Lance, right? And they shared their thoughts and they're passionate about it. Okay, fair enough. If Lance Kelly never had a falling out with Ty Corbin, would people be saying this type of stuff still? Would they be calling Lance Kelly out? You know what I'm saying? Just a little question. And last but not least, Lone Wolf. Come over this side of the pond and solve crime, Pink Panther. Pink Panther. I think by the time I'm over there, I probably would have been shot dead on the spot by somebody. Anyway, so I said, what I want to briefly look at now is that Horsegate scenario situation. Let's just provide the backstory for how it all came about, okay? Initially, when we were more in the dark, we were thinking of different possibilities. At first, the likes of the gate leading up to the Grangeshed property, the theories of what if Dylan forgot to close it, lock it, or, I don't know, broke it by running over it. if he was desperate to get the grain truck in the grain shed initially, and that Brenner heard or was startled by it, and it triggered him, and he snapped from there on. That was one of the initial ideas and suggestions. But then upon finding out and discovering what the gate physically looked like, very knackered and fragile, locked or not, it's no problem, nor would be much damage. It was flexible, it could be flattened, it could be folded down, whatever. Not a complete obstacle. So that was ruled out. But then it was brought up. Exactly when? Well, I do remember hearing about it in 2023. Was it more so in the Heavy D interview? It might have been first brought up in the Heavy D interview. I could be wrong. And then mentioned in one of the East Idaho News ones about how when the family got there initially and they were around Brenner and were trying to ask what was happening, and Brenner saying, "Oh, I'm not quite sure." But one thing that Justin did say was Brenner told Justin, that Dylan was reversing into the grain shed property, backed into the horse gate, damaged it, and that annoyed him. That's all that was mentioned. Did it happen? I don't know. The thing you got to take in mind, Brenner has lied with the lie detector, as you remember, and lied about a few other things. This could be fake as well. This could be a load of BS. But initially, when hearing about it first, I was thinking, a horse gate? Well, where's the horse gate to begin with? I don't see one. Where? And then upon looking at the photos, looking back, found out where the horse gate was, right? So it was more so a theory, an explanation which then Justin applied in some of the interviews and suggested himself that could have been the possibility as to one thing led to another, which was Brenner snapping and then taking it out on Dylan because Dylan was supposedly reckless. Is there even a possibility that someone like Dylan Rounds could accidentally break something? Yeah, because Justin Rounds told the story that Dylan Rounds was known to, well, at times break farming equipment, but keep quiet about it, and Colton would be the one to hold all the secrets. And I saw that in a post by Justin Rounds in 2023, months ago, when reflecting back on Dylan's life. So if Dylan at times could be considered a bit reckless, I think a few other people quoted that in general somehow in the comments, saying that Dylan Rounds, the way his farming was and his style, it was a bit reckless and messy at times. Well, Brenner said himself, but do you believe in Brenner? Was showing jealousy towards Dylan back in 2021 at the shop of Justin Rounds with the truck that was taken in at the time, when Don Hatley was present as well and Dylan was not within the same room, and Brenner was having a go and calling out Dylan for how he treats things and treats equipment. So if it runs across board that all these different people, including Brenner, including people online and maybe locals, hinting at the possibility that Dylan was a bit reckless at times, even the father admitting it as well, the chances of Dylan Rounds accidentally reversing into the horse gate and breaking it, unaware that the horse gate was closed at the time, and in the mindset Dylan was in a rush against time because of the rain coming in and having to preserve his seed, one thing once again could have led to another, and Dylan accidentally broke the horse gate. Maybe then Dylan stopped, got out to inspect. Brenner was startled by it because of the noise and got angry and took it out on Dylan. Why would that even happen? Like, why would Brenner take it out on Dylan? Like, why would it trigger him? Well, whether he's got a short fuse or not, whether he had a hangover and he was already in a moody situation, his long-standing grudge with Dylan building over time reached the overflow, breaking point possibly. I've done a psychological analysis of possible motives and reasons to why Brenner did what he did to Dylan. Be sure to check back on that video. I'm aware that video back then fell on deaf ears and very, very disappointing and unfortunate, but there's nothing I can do about that. I said what I said back then. But just to reiterate one of the potential points, considering that Brenner supposedly lost his sheet and got very angry in the past when some other individual who was leaving left the gate open, which led to the horse escaping, and Brenner had to try and get it back, and it was a bit of an ordeal. that really angered Brenner off from the reports and people that witnessed it and, passed it on to the family about them. So that could just be because of protectiveness. If you feel something you care about is in danger or is harmed by somebody else, you may take it out on that person that caused harm or distress to something you love. Very protective. If Brenner was protective of his horse, maybe that when Dylan broke the gate, that annoyed Brenner because it was damage, repairs that needs to be done, and could it impact the horse in some way? Maybe. The only questions that I would like to throw out there, okay, I'm already aware that people wouldn't even agree with this to begin with because they're firmly in belief that Dylan did not take the grain truck down to the grain shed, but I'm doing it from a certain perspective and angle like I've always have done, acknowledging the people that do think this way at least. I've given the time for others. I've acknowledged their comments about the alternative story. Now we're looking at this option, this theory. It's a theory. There's no harm in that. A theory of an event, supposedly, which then led to the possible motive and reasoning behind Brenner's actions, right? And I just want to look at it visually. I want to look at some potential evidence, right? It might be a hard thing to come by within the Dylan Brown's case when there's a lot of talk and not enough, physical evidence or attempts of showing this and showing that, but I'm going to try and put it into perspective today, okay? So I think what we'll do, if I want to add on some additional points, I can do shortly, but my first question will be, if the horse gate, which I assume was closed, which is kind of within or near to the entrance of the grain shed property, as you'll see shortly, if Dylan did reverse back into that and was unaware that it was, closed, would that imply that Brenner's horse was in the grain shed at the time of when Dylan was murdered? Does anyone know that? Besides the latest story of the horse parting ways with Brenner or Brenner walking the horse up to the railroad tracks, whatever that is, and where it went afterwards, whatever. My question is, on the day Dylan Rounds was murdered, was Brenner's horse in the grain shed property at the time? Yes or no? If the horse gate was closed, why would it need to be closed? To keep whatever is in from getting out, you'd think. Maybe. What other reason would there be to have a gate going across, which means you'd have to constantly open and close it, which would be just an inconvenience, unless there was a true reason that you had an animal inside and you wanted to keep it safe. You didn't want it just running off. As because of previous experience, there's a small possibility there, right? But if anyone can answer it, was the horse at the time, the murder of Dylan Rounds, in the grain shed, yes or no? Because if it was in the grain shed at the time and Dylan was trying to reverse his truck into it and hence damage the gate at the same time, did that startle the horse, cause distress to the horse? Did then Brenner get very protective afterwards and then reacted? I've just not seen that question, nor have I seen an answer. So if anyone can fill that area in there, it's a very simple question. I know some people struggle to answer simple questions, but for people that may have a bit of knowledge or just your own thoughts, that's welcome in the chat or comment section down below, right? But let's just look at the photo now of the potential horse gate. What we're looking at now is the inside of the grain shed property, and it's like at the entrance, the opening of if you used to walk in. And upon looking on the right hand side, you do have a gate here, which I don't know, I think that might be like a gate stopper, like a pole in the ground, and then the gate in front of it to stop it swinging completely open, I guess, and then bashing against the side of the wall in the tyre on the other side. There appears to be a bit of blue rope as well, which I've never really picked up on before. Maybe that blue rope was initially used to tie to the other post or the other gate or so to keep it closed. Was there an actual lock or key on it? I'm not sure. Or was it just more the use of rope? Possibility. But it does look like a gate, doesn't it? It's currently open at that point. Is it damaged? No. It's a bit rusty and worn, but that's just with time, I guess. There isn't like a door on the Grangeshed property. There's no like door, what you'd think like with a barn when it's got barn doors. But this little gate, which you could easily climb over, right? But you'd still have to open it if you were reversing something into this shed, whether it fits or not, right? Or just a portion of it fits in. So if there's no damage on it, then how could that link to what Brenner was saying, how Dylan supposedly backed into it and damaged it? Well, if we look on the left-hand side, appears to be the same thing, right? Like a gate, which same characteristics as this one. Visually looking, both looks the same age and material. The only difference is that this one is stood upright. So why is that? And it is a bit twisted and bent. As you can see, metal a bit twisted, dented. Would that imply that this is the damaged gate that came off broken from this one? I don't know. Or was this an old one or a spare gate propped up against the side? I'm not quite sure. But it definitely appears to be a gate, and it's the same one as this, whether you had two that closed, open and closed and tied together. Dylan reversed back and hit one of them, such as this. That's why it's kind of like discarded on the side. The noise and clatter startled Brenner, who came out and then wondered what was going on and got triggered. And then one thing led to another. My only other question would be to possibly highlight the possibilities. Okay, we've seen damage to the gate here because it does look damaged. Was Dylan's grain truck damaged in any way from the back end? If anybody can answer that question, feel free to do so. So, besides, was there a horse in there on the day, yes or no? Was there any reports of Dylan's grain truck with damage to the rear end? A dent in the truck? Scratch marks? Paint damage? If it made contact with the gate? Can anyone answer that? Now, one last thing, what I want to do is like a demonstration, an exercise of balance, and hopefully people can appreciate and acknowledge this, is that if those strongly believe that Dylan did not take the grain truck down to the grain shed, nor would he have reversed into the horse gate and damaged it, none of that happened, well, let's look at it from the possibility that if Brenner was the one responsible for damaging his own gate, let's just call it that. You might be wondering, well, why would Brenner do that? Well, let me get to that point eventually. So in the mindset of Corey or somebody else, that later on in the day or so, that Brenner took the grain truck, Dylan's, and Brenner himself drove it down to the grain shed property and reversed it in. Whether Brenner was focused or reckless, careless, distracted, in a rush, whatever it might be, he could have been reversing or attempting to reverse it into the grain shed, but forgot he had the horse gate locked, closed, and then crashed into it. Silly Brenner. Silly Billy Brenner. Clumsy Brenner. So why did Brenner not say that story to Justin when the parents were down there? Maybe because Brenner finds it embarrassing. You might think, does it really matter? Is there any examples to highlight other times where Brenner may have twisted the story when it was his own doing? Yeah. You think back to a few years ago now when Brenner was in Montello and his trailer ended up bursting into flames and maybe exploding as well, and it burnt down. Now, stories have changed with time, but it was Brenner's own clumsiness, supposedly, because he left the hob or the stove on and the propane tanks were left inside as well. Brenner wasn't there at the time because he went elsewhere, but he left things on inside, and then that's what triggered the fire or the explosion, right? His own clumsiness, his own recklessness of being forgetful and just reckless. But I guess if he was to tell the story afterwards, he may have twisted or turned it in a different way. I mean, the way it's been portrayed by others was that somebody went there as revenge to shoot up Brenner's trailer and then it exploded that way. I don't know where that came from, but I just sense that when Brenner has his shortcomings, where he messes up, where he looks like an idiot, he doesn't like to acknowledge that, so he twists and changes the story and puts the blame on somebody else from his own silly actions. So that's a possibility there with maybe the horse gate was in fact damaged on the day Dylan Rounds was killed, but maybe it wasn't Dylan that reversed into it, but it was Brenner, if Brenner was supposedly the one that actually took the grain truck down to the grain shed later on in the day. You see how a singular event can apply to two different outcomes from two different people? Does that make sense? This is what I mean. This is just an exercise of balance I just wanted to implement once again, because I think when it comes to attitude and behavior over time, it is lost along the way and people may not always see it or pick up on it with all the other darkness going on. So hopefully that's been made a bit clearer there. This theory, if you want to call it, and leading to a possible motive, does it lead to Dylan being found? No, but once again, it just arranges the building blocks as to how one thing followed to another, right? No harm in doing that. And if new patterns can be discovered along the way, patterns are good. Patterns can be from a direction. And if it's in the right direction, that'll be for the better. So, if you do have any additional points or comments down below, feel free to do so. I believe as of tomorrow, I do need to divert my attention and focus in acknowledgement of the content creator team when it comes to Watcher of Realms. They have been very good over there, so I do need to give them some more attention and focus and care there. So there'll be some other alternative videos coming shortly. I do have a deadline, a very important deadline that needs to be met with the content creation area, so I'll get on with that tomorrow. And maybe at this time, maybe a Dylan Rounds one. If not, another day it can happen. So hopefully you enjoyed the video in general. I'll see you next time. For now, goodbye and good night.